All right, so this video is to correct the error of your practice problems in lesson 2.8. So in that video, I said to take the mass of the food burned rather than the mass of water. So let's talk about why I was wrong and what it actually means. So thinking about this, right? So we know that we have a sample of bread in this particular example, and our sample of bread is going to transfer all of its food energy into this calorimeter of water, right? And we're going to read that energy through the thermometer. So if I'm burning everything and all of the energy is going here, right, I should take into consideration the mass of the water, not of the food, right? So for example, going backwards, ignoring the math right now, let's say there was 100 calories in this bread, right? And if all of that energy transferred over here, this one would also have would change to 100 calories depending on the mass of the water, not of the food. And I'll talk about why we care about the mass of the food burned later on. So let's redo this problem correctly, right? So looking at the mass of the water now, let's read this first straight through and then talk about what are our new components for our equation. So here we have a 5-gram mass of bread that raises the temperature of the water from 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, right? So in blue, I've listed the mass of the food burned. So let's talk about the mass of the food and underline it in red or blue, right? For the change in temperature, I have 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, right? And then it also says, assume you have 100 milliliters of water. So I'm starting with 100 milliliters of water this time. So you might have learned in your previous science classes that 100 milliliters of water is just 100 grams of water. Both of these are exactly the same, right? So if I have 1 milliliter of water, that is going to be 1 gram of water. Kind of convenient, right? Okay. Then it says when you mass the sample after burning, you find that there is 2.5 grams of bread that did not burn, right? So here we're talking about massive food burned as well. So now that we've broken down our key ideas, let's read what the question is asking. So now it's asking how many calories can be found in the bread and how many calories per gram is this? So the second question that I added is going to address why we care about the mass of the food burned. So let's start with the mass of the water. So I know my mass of the water in this case is 100 milliliters. So in this container is 100 milliliters of water. I'm going to ignore this because this was just part of our example. All right, our specific heat, that's still going to be 1. Our change in temperature is going to be the difference between these two temperatures, right? So 25 minus 5. Oh, 25 minus 20. Right. So if I plug all of this into my equation for heat energy, right, going everything in order, I'm just going to write it right next to it. 100 times 1 times change in temperature, which is 5. All right. So all of that will give me my heat or energy given off in calories. So 100 times 1 times 5 is 500 lowercase c calories. So the error I made mainly was that in the video, I talked about taking the mass of the food, not the mass of the water. You should be taking the mass of the water, right? So this 500 calories answers the question that we were addressing before. Now, the second question, how many calories per gram this is, we need to talk about how much food was actually burned, right? So in this case, we started with 5 grams of food and we have 2.5 grams of food left. So how much actually burned off? Well, if I find the difference again, I can also figure out how much of the food actually burned. So now I know that 2.5 grams of the food has burned, right? So in this case, I know from 2.5 grams of the bread will give me 500 calories. But what if I want to know how much is in 1 gram of food? Well, I would just need to split this 500 calories up between each gram that exists, right? So mathematically, that would just be 500 calories divided by 2.5 grams, right? So if I do that, 500 calories, so you can use a calculator if you would like, divided by 2.5 grams is going to be 200 lowercase c calories per gram, right? So feel free to rewatch this video again. So mainly the key error was that I took the mass of the water instead of the mass of the food. We used the mass of the food burned to figure out how many calories per gram something is, right? So the tiny little error here is just this number was wrong when I filmed that video, right? So at this point, you can move on to the next slide and try that practice problem just to double check if we corrected that error or not.